Here we go, the news and you, a prepper's perspective of what's in the news and how we can use it to think about and prepare in our own lives. This is for November 12th. All right, Canadian GDP data revised upward. Well, the article said that there was approximately a year's worth of growth that was unreported in our numbers. So this is good news for the economy, but bad for the Bank of Canada that used inaccurate data for its recent 50 basis point cut. There's a funny line in the article that said the revisions will make the last 3 years statistically less painful. I thought, what? Who cares? If the last 3 years were actually painful, I don't really care if they say, well, it's statistically it was less painful for you. I don't get it. Lessons from this. Well, have solid controls in place to validate and collect data. So how are you collecting data? What data points are you using for whatever that data is used for? Whatever it is that you're looking at. And you need strong oversight and challenge of that data. So in some sectors and businesses, they focus on the three lines of defense, which is where the first line are the people actually doing the work. They're kind of on the ground, and they would have people, bringing in that data, and they should have people on their own teams validating that data. Then you go up to the second line of defense, which is supposed to be independent from the first line, and they then provide some oversight. So they look at that and they say, yeah, these numbers, they seem to make sense. Looks good, and they provide some challenge on that just to make sure that things are on the up and up and accurate. And then you have the third line of defense, which then kind of looks at what everybody's doing. And so everybody's making sure that everybody else is doing the best work that they can and what they're supposed to be doing. So you really have to have that in place. I have seen, in my career as well, lots of revisions to data, and it always just blows my mind when how can you miss so much stuff? And I start to think, okay, is this being, is it kind of nefarious? Are there ulterior motives? Is it being withheld on purpose for some reason? And it reminded me of a quote I heard that said, models are always wrong, but some are useful. Germany installed a secret weather station in Canada during World War II. So this article said apparently this station disguised as drums, not a drum set, musical drums, but probably oil drums, discarded or whatnot. A submarine had come over, popped up, they installed this weather station, and then left. Undiscovered for 30 years. And this just kind of showcases the importance, of weather monitoring and surveillance. So what lessons can we take from this? Well, I would recommend maybe we should check the Arctic right now. Maybe we should do a look for undiscovered weather stations or other surveillance things in our north. We need to defend it more. We need to have more ownership and more presence there. We have to stay vigilant. If something is out of place, now this might not have looked out of place, but if you see discarded drums, oil drums, then maybe clean them up. But if it's out of place, investigate it. Quite often in security exercises and events that I would do, it wasn't, okay, someone broke in and they took something. That's all you were worried about. What did they steal? Well, maybe it's what did they leave? Did they leave something to keep tabs on you, to monitor you, to collect data? We're likely all under surveillance more than we would like. It was funny. I was at a volunteer at a community group close to my property, and both the president and myself as vice president, we were in our meeting with the rest of the crew, the board, and we had mentioned TELUS, a phone provider, communications provider here. We had mentioned it in our meeting, saying, yeah, we've got to chat with them about the line that we have at the little community hall. And within the span of a minute, both my phone and his phone rang, and it said TELUS calling. And I try and turn off everything on my phone that I can that allows the microphone to be used, I would sometimes say the word seriously and Siri would pop up saying, yeah, well, how can I help you? Or I can't get that right now. There are people spying on you. I've seen, at a corporate level, people search, do you always use the same boardroom? Have you ever swept it for listening devices? Have you ever looked for anything out of place? Say, well, what's this? This is not one of our microphones. Watch for stuff like that. We did some talks on this channel about how people might sit across the street while you have your garage door open and look with binoculars to see what cool stuff you have that they want to take. So be attentive to this thing, be a little bit more suspicious than I think we are, because I think we should be. Worsening extremism. So there was a few articles about worsening extremism. Then as I read them, I started thinking, okay, some of the outcry and backlash and things they were saying, or is it a lack of repercussions? So the first article had said the Ontario School Board, an Ontario school had played a Palestinian protest song during Remembrance Day. No other music played, just this one. And the principal had said in the article that it was trying to bring some diversity to something that was usually only about a white guy who has done something related to the military. It was a good thing I was sitting down when I read it, because otherwise I think I would have fallen over. That blew my mind. That's so many kinds of wrong. I don't even really know where to start with it. And some articles, went on to say, well, it's good. It's good. Now, these were opinions. A lot were opinion pieces and whatnot, but they said, it's good to identify, these snakes in the grass, these wolves in sheep clothing, wherever they are. Who doesn't share your values that we want in Canada? Because there's been a lot on that, a lot of articles recently on immigration and the values that different cultures bring and the benefits, pros and cons. So when you see someone going against your culture, wherever that is, if it's your national, your country's culture, if it's your community's culture, if it is your business culture, right? There's a lot of talk in the business world, still is now, but more predominance lately of risk culture. What's your culture of risk at your company? So if you see someone going against this culture, what are the repercussions? What are you going to do about it? What controls do you have in place? People say, "Oh, it's okay. We have an acceptable use policy." Okay, great. That's pretty weak. What happens if someone breaks your policy? What do you do? What are the consequences? Do you enforce it in a standard and consistent way, or do you say, "Well, you know what? I kind of like this person, or they've been here longer, or they haven't, made me mad today as the leader. So they're going to get a pass, but this other person who I don't like, I think we're going to terminate them, or we're going to hammer them a little harder," right? You have to look at what do you do when your controls that you have in place, when things go against your culture, what are the consequences? And then there was a lot on protests and protesters. And then I thought, well, how do we evaluate these? And how do you look at these things, from an objective lens? And when I see different protests, I always, for me, initially look at how are they protesting? Is it a lawful protest? Or are they breaking the law in the protest? Okay, because we have laws. And if you're breaking the law, that tells me something about the group or the people that are protesting. Are you impeding the rights of others to try and say, well, your rights are being trampled upon, so I'm going to trample on your rights? Again, it's the pendulum, right? Is this a math equation? Do two wrongs, do they actually make a right? If you feel that your rights are being trampled upon, is it just to trample on my rights or someone else's rights to do that? Is there violence at the protest or the protesters? Are they smashing things? Are they yelling hateful things? Are they really disrupting things? Now I get it, disrupt things, and that's supposed to draw attention to your cause. But think about it. I think, from my perspective, you're doing your cause a disservice if you're doing that, because I will look negatively upon you. I will judge you based on how you're behaving at the protest. So that's just some of the things I think that we can take away from this for a risk-based decision is, how do we evaluate two different sides in something? Where do we go for our information? And again, back to the other topic of this post, this video, is the data, the validity of the data. So it all comes together. You see, it's all just about good risk management, good risk-based decision making. Where are you getting your data from? Do you have a variety of sources? How are you validating that data? And that's always a big caveat for these things that I read in the news, because again, the news gives you one perspective of it. So you have to look past that and say, well, how are we going to do this? How are we going to evaluate the data? And what do we do with that? And then what controls do we have in place? What are our beliefs? What is our culture at our company, in our community, in my family, in my province, in my country? What are those cultural beliefs and things that we value? And how do we defend them? What are we willing to do to defend them? Are we willing to see the rights of many often trampled upon because of the voicing of the perceived rights of a few? And quite often, lately, these protests, this happens, and it's great that we have the ability to protest, lawfully protest, peacefully protest, respectfully protest in Canada. But they're about things that are happening elsewhere, and that's fine. We want to draw attention to these causes, but we also have to look for what's happening here at home first. What's in your own house? And if things are getting out of hand here, if we're starting to stray too far from what made us great and made people want to come here and live here, then we have to take a hard look at that. What's the culture, and what are we going to do about it when that gets violated? Thanks very much. Like and subscribe. Talk to you soon.